This is Think Tech Hawaii. Community matters here.
Aloha and happy Chinese New Year, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pauline Shakmakchin, your host for Outside In. Now, today we're going to discuss the 6 sister city relationships China has with Honolulu with my guest, Jeffrey Lau. Hi, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Pauline.
Brilliant. Okay, now, we've got 6 sister cities we have to cover.
That's
and
correct.
This is in honor of the new year of the Earth Dog.
That's correct.
And we want to get to all of them in the time that we have. But very quickly, let's start off with a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I'm a practicing attorney here in Honolulu, have been for the last 40 years. But several years ago, I took an interest in Chinese history and culture. And over the last 10 to 15 years now, I've been traveling to China anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 times a year.
Now, you're known as the honorary consul for Belgium in addition to your legal work.
That is correct.
So how did you get involved with the management of these sister city relationships between China and Honolulu?
Well, that's in a completely different category. The Belgian thing came from the country of Belgium. They wanted somebody that knew about their country. And my father had served in the U.S. Armed Forces during the Battle of the Bulge there. Mm-hmm. Now, on the Chinese side, about 20 years ago, my father decided that the family was so much interested in mainstream America that he thought we should all learn a little bit about Chinese culture. So all of a sudden in 1996, he said, "That's it, I've had enough, we're all going to China." And we all looked at him like, "Oh, what, are you crazy? Why are we doing this?" But lo and behold, we went to the family villages after we toured some of the national monuments. And it shocked all of us to find out that the people there in Toisan, which is now Taishan, the Siep district in southern China, right above Macau, right next to Zhongshan, which is where all the Hawaii people are from, they all knew who we were, and we didn't know who they were. And looking up on the walls of these family homes, all of our pictures were there, our graduation photos and all, and we didn't know anything about these people. So that started me on another lifelong journey to try to find out about our relationships in China. After all, it's almost 4 generations removed.
Okay, let's start with sister city number 1. We're going to cover them in chronological order that they were made a sister city of Honolulu. So we're going to Hainan Island now.
Yes, Hainan Dao.
Yes, and the specific city is Haikou.
Yes, it is now Haikou. Originally, it was Hainan Dao when it was part of Guangdong province. But in 1986, a fellow classmate of mine from Punahou, Lee Wai-Du, led a delegation there to create the very first sister city in mainland China with Hawaii. And it was a time, just the whole island. Now it's just the capital city of Hainan.
And the date of this is 1986, that the relationship.
1986, that is correct.
So this is the oldest of the sister cities.
Right.
And you also mentioned, when we were talking about this earlier, there's a resort city called Sanya.
Oh, yes.
And how is that? Is that close to Haikou?
It's at the opposite end of the island. Actually, I believe they have developed a relationship with the island of Kauai, that county. But nonetheless, whenever the governor or the mayor of Honolulu goes to Hainan, typically we go to both Haikou, the capital city, and then we take a bus trip or a rail trip down to Sanya, which is a really beautiful resort area, very much in the making of Waikiki. Well, that's what they copied anyway.
Oh, right.
One of the hotels looks just like the Royal Hawaiian.
Oh, I see. Why did they choose to copy Waikiki?
Well, they were an outpost. In ancient times, Hainan was where the emperor kicked people out of the country that had violated laws, just like beyond the edge of the Great Wall out in the Xinjiang Desert.
So you'd be sent into exile.
You were sent into exile there, so it was a barren land. And so when it became its own province, they said, what are we going to do? We can grow some crops, but we have all these lovely beaches facing Vietnam and the Philippines, so they decided to develop a resort tour tourism. And so where did they copy? Hawaii. In fact, if you look at the Hainan model, it looks just like the Hawaii H, except it's spelled with Hainan instead of Hawaii
okay.
in a multicolored rainbow design.
I imagine that's because people from Hainan or Haikou have visited Honolulu and they found that to be the most picturesque way of creating a resort.
Yes, one of my uncles actually started a series of management programs with Communist Party leaders in China to come and visit the College of Business Administration here in Hawaii, and he started an exchange program learning about Western management styles. And it all started from Hainan. Later on, Lee Wide set up a series of legal seminars between the attorneys in Guangdong province and with Hawaii also. So we served for a number of years in that capacity also.
As far as you're aware, Jeff, is Sanya the only resort in all of China that has mimicked Waikiki successfully?
They have done the most at this time. Clearly, the Hong Kong area and Macau would like to, but they don't have the beautiful beaches that Hainan has. So has Zhoushan Island near Ningbo, across the bay, in Hangzhou Bay, south of Shanghai. And of course, another sister city way up north, the third one that we did, Qinhuangdao, actually talked to me about having some of our large international architect firms come in to create a Waikiki of the North, where all of the Russian tourists and all of the Mongolian tourists and Northern Chinese come and visit, including Mao at the time.
Huh. Okay, that's really interesting. So are a lot of the visitors to Sanya other Chinese from the other provinces? Because it's not something that's probably internationally known as a resort.
Yes, it's booming now as a wedding location and a beauty contest location. The primary international tourists, though, are Russian.
Oh, right.
Believe it or not. Right.
They're sort of everywhere, aren't
so,
they?
right. So all the Italian foods, Russian foods are there, and they're taking up a lot of the beach space right now.
Yes, that's the same in the Mediterranean, in the French Riviera, and also in Cyprus.
Yes.
In Limassol. So it's very interesting that
very
they've gone to...
similar.
Yes. So let's move on to the second one.
Okay.
And this is of particular closeness to Hawaii.
Absolutely.
This is Zhongshan.
Yes.
And this was 1986 as well?
1997.
1997.
That's 11 years later.
11 years later, we have a
yes.
second sister city. And this is important, Zhongshan, because a lot of the Hawaiians of Chinese ancestry came from this city.
About 70% of all the Chinese that grew up in Hawaii come from the Zhongshan region of China. Now, if you need an idea of where this is located, if you think of Horseshoe with Hong Kong on the northern end, Macau on the southern end, and Guangzhou, Canton in the middle, this would be above Macau.
Okay.
And that's where most of the Chinese, because it's a water town or near the ocean, they could see all of the Portuguese, American, British sailing ships going in, plying the waters between Guangzhou and the west. So many of them got on board and came to Hawaii. Now, it's funny because they came a little later than the original Chinese, the Toisan people, which is the next valley over toward the southwest of Macau. They all went to the United States, to the gold fields, to build the railroads, and as merchants to New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. So my family goes all the way back to those in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But nonetheless, later, the next group came in from Zhongshan, and they happened to be coming just about the time the Asian Exclusion Acts went into effect. So many of them were prevented from going to the U.S. mainland. So they decided to stay in Hawaii, and lo and behold, when Hawaii was annexed to the United States, they became U.S. citizens.
That's right.
And so that's how fortunate they were for all of us to be here today.
Brilliant. So that's a particularly important one, that second relationship.
Absolutely.
Now let's move on to the third one, and this becomes a sister city in 2010. This is Qinhuangdao.
Yes.
And this has an interesting relationship with Chinese history because there's a link to the first emperor of China and as well as the last emperor or the Qing dynasty.
That's correct.
In China.
When I became president of the Chinese Chamber in 2010, it was the 99th to 100th year anniversary of the Chinese Chamber. And I thought, well, we have two sister cities now in the south, Hainan, Hainandao, and Haikou, and also Zhongshan, both of them in Cantonese in the Hong Kong area. And I thought, wouldn't it be great for us to expand our reach across the country So we looked for one of the northern cities, and it just so happened the year before, 2009, one of our Narcissus princesses, second princess, had run in a number of Chinese beauty pageants in China, ran in our local pageant and came in second princess when she could hardly speak English at the time. But she was such a dynamic person that we discussed the possibility of including her hometown way up north, a beach town, right on the Bohai Sea, and that was Qinhuangdao. And then I found out about the historical significance of that city. 2 times in Chinese history, very, very important. The first was the Qin dynasty, the emperor that unified all of China, and he started the Great Wall coming out of the ocean right there in Qinhuangdao. So Lao Lung To is right there where the dragon wall comes out of the water and transverses all the way across to the Taklamakan Desert in Xinjiang, all the way across China. That's where it began. And of course, he had that search for the magic elixir of life, and he sent 500 maidens and young men out to sea in search of that elixir. I guess they never found it.
No, I guess
Qinhuangdao has not done much since then.
But the Chinese are very long living.
Absolutely, and maybe that's where it comes from. But many years later, at the end of the Ming Dynasty, that location became famous again because that's where the first pass under heaven is. The Ming Dynasty had a wall there, a big fortress, and it was there to keep the Manchurians out, the Qing people. And what happened was the general in charge, Wu Songui, he thought the Ming emperor was too interested in his wife, and he didn't like that. So when the Ming Dynasty forces were arrayed on this at the first pass under heaven, they negotiated with the Qing coming in and let them through, and so that they could come all the way into China, fight the revolution that was going on in Beijing, and that's how the Qing dynasty got started in China. Of course, the previous Ming emperor, he hung himself on Coal Hill.
That's right, yes.
As you might know.
Yeah.
And that started the Qing dynasty in about 1400. Interestingly enough, Wu Songui later on went all the way south to Yunnan and created a whole nother kingdom. He was part of the Yue kingdom in southern China. And he had his own kingdom. So that's a little bit of history. So now, when we decide to have this as a sister city, they had all of this historical perspective. Beidai He, which was where all the resorts for the Europeans were located from Beijing. They would come, and then later the Communist Party took that over. You had Shanghai Guan, the first pass under heaven, and Lao Lung To. So they had terrific tourist attractions. So they had contacted myself and at the time Peter Carlisle, the mayor, and said, hey, do you have anyone that can help us design a Waikiki project here up in the north? And we thought about it. We did talk to a number of architects, but the problem is their season is like the Northeast in New Jersey. You have a short summer season, and you couldn't do it all year round. But during that summer, it's packed with Russian tourists and Korean tourists and others.
The Russians go there too. They're up in the north. It's closer to them.
Closer.
Yes.
It's much closer.
Brilliant.
So that became the third sister city that we have going well right now.
And another beach as well.
And another beach project.
Brilliant,
Yes.
Jeff. Now we're going to just take a little quick break, and we'll be back and talk about the other 3 cities.
Okay, just can't wait to have that happen.
This is Think Tech Hawaii, raising public awareness.
You can be the greatest, you can be the best. You can be the King Kong banging on your chest. You can beat the world, you can beat the war. You could talk to God, go banging on his door. You can throw your hands up, you can beat the clock. You can move a mountain, you can break rocks. You can be a master, don't wait for luck. Dedicate yourself and you can find yourself. Stand in the Hall of Fame. And the world's gonna know your name.
Ted Ralston here, folks, your host on Where the Drone Leads, our weekly show at noon on Thursdays here on Think Tech, where we talk about drones, anything to do about drones, remotely piloted aircraft, unmanned air systems, whatever you want to call them, emerging into Hawaii's economy, educational framework, and our public life. We talk about things associated with the use, the misuse, technology, engineering, legislation, with local experts as well as people from across the country. Please join us noon on Thursdays and catch the latest on what's taking place in the world of drones that might affect you.
Aloha and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're discussing the 6 sister city relationships China has with Honolulu. And we covered the first 3, right, Jeff?
That is correct.
So we're going to cover the next 3. But before we do that, there are 2 relevant organizations to this scheme of these sister cities Honolulu has with China. So do you want to explain those 2
Sure,
organizations?
absolutely. The City and County of Honolulu started the International City Projects, which is part of a national organization. Although we've kind of gone independent because you're only supposed to have 1 per country. And for the Philippines, Japan, Korea, and China, the city and county has more than 1 sister city in each. So as a result, we have a lot more relationships. From the Chinese side, there are 2 organizations that we deal with. One is CAIFC, which is the China Association for International Friendly Contacts, and that deals with like the Chinese Chamber and other nonprofit organizations that are not government. They are basically made up of senior government officials from China that have been on the international relations scene as ambassadors and consul generals around the world. And so they have the right temperament to deal with Western organizations. So the Chinese Chamber works very closely with them, bringing fighter aircraft back and forth, flying Tiger planes to our Pacific Aviation Museum and other things along that line, and also exchange of students, a lot of. Now the other one is the Chinese Association of Friendly Contacts with Foreign Countries, FFC. And that is government to government more so. So that would be the City and County of Honolulu's program directly with the Chinese government, the ongoing government people, not the retired government people. So those 2 organizations work closely together to create lifelong relationships amongst the people and the states and the political entities and with the rest of the world, really. And so the key behind all of this is developing friendships among people so that there's a better understanding of each other and so that we're not always at political odds with one another.
Yes, and a better understanding of each other's beach resorts.
Among others for Hawaii,
Because everybody likes to go to the beach.
Absolutely.
Except, actually, most of the people who I know who live in Hawaii here, they don't really go to the beach because
No.
it's something you can do anytime. It's
Right,
how
and
it
we
is.
have to work hard to be able to afford to stay here.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Right, right.
Now, let's get to the other 3 sister cities.
Yes.
And we're going to go to the world of the pandas. This is Chengdu, which is famous for the panda reservation.
Right. The Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Honolulu had a long interest in bringing a panda to our Honolulu Zoo, but the cost was just so prohibitive that we've tailed away from that. At the same time, we wanted to develop an ongoing relationship with them, and at one point, Mayor Peter Carlisle tasked me with going to Chengdu to see if we could establish that relationship. It had started a few years earlier, but it was off and on, off and on. It's a long way inland. Our first 2, as you know, are in the south. The third one, Qingwandao, was in the north.
And this is Sichuan province.
This was the Sichuan province, the Shu Kingdom, way at the interior of China, just at the foothills of the Himalaya mountains. So it's a far distance from any of our other relationships. So we went out there, set it up, and they said they had absolutely no problem with it. It's by far our largest sister city. The population went from about 5 million to 10 to 12, and now if you include the environs, about 15 million people, when Chongqing, the former capital, broke away to its own semi-autonomous region. That has 35 million people. We don't have a sister city relationship. We stay with Chengdu, the original capital of the Shu Kingdom.
And did you get to hold a panda when you went
Oh,
there?
yes, yes, absolutely.
Everybody I'm so jealous because it's not so easy to do nowadays.
Yeah.
Before you had to make an application, it was fairly straightforward, but now everybody wants to do it.
Now
so.
you can't do it.
Yeah,
Actually,
you
it's
can't,
just been
yeah.
banned recently
Oh,
because
what a
the
pity.
pandas were getting human diseases.
Oh, disgusting.
And so they kept trying to open it back up, and then the pandas would get infected, and then they would have to shut it down. And the money that you pay to do this was really going for panda-based research for the breeding of pandas. And now they have a surplus within the confines.
Because they have a general problem breeding.
Right. In the wild, they move so slowly and they don't live in pairs. So even finding a mate in the wild is very, very difficult for them. But the last couple of years, they've had 20, 24 pandas a year born.
That's pretty good.
And so now they're trying to lease them out to all of the zoos around the world. But still, Hawaii cannot afford the price.
Would it be, I mean, this is not my area, but it's got an awful lot of fur, doesn't it? So it'd be in a special condition at the zoo.
Oh,
'cause
yes.
It's quite hot
You
here.
pretty much need an air-conditioned facility, although in parts of their environment, it can get warm.
Yeah.
They're pretty tough because of all that fur and padding. They can fall and they can still run pretty quick, but they only eat arrow bamboo, and
That's
that's the
right.
real issue. If you bring pandas to Hawaii, you probably need a semi-air-conditioned facility, half indoors, half outside, and you need a research base to study whether the bamboo that we have here might be edible by the animals.
That's the sort of facility. I saw the 2 pandas that are held in Hong Kong in the ocean park.
Yes, Ocean Park.
And everybody was taking, it was hilarious because everybody's taking photographs of them, and there's this panda just sleeping with its legs up in the air.
Right.
And they had a little chart of its daily activities,
Right.
and it was basically 85% eating, sleeping, doing nothing.
Right, right. Yeah, so that's a beautiful facility they have there. What they do at Ocean Park is they have video cameras so you can see them closer.
Yeah.
But if you go to Chengdu and you go to the panda breeding base, you're this close to the baby pandas behind the glass.
Yeah, I heard about friends of mine who are
Yeah.
Chinese. They got to hold one, and they
Yes.
said once you hold one, you don't want to let go of it.
Yes,
So the little baby ones.
And there's also another surrogate called the red panda, which is like a big raccoon, but really, really cute animal, very light. And at one point we were able to carry those also, and they're super cute.
But they were
also.
getting the same human diseases as well?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
same
been
problem.
a problem.
Okay, so leaving the pandas aside, let's go to the 5th sister.
Oh, let me say
yes,
a
yes.
few more things about Chengdu. It's the largest sister city.
Yep.
They're very dynamic. Foxconn and their iPhones and iPads are all now being built in Chengdu. It's a booming area, and it's going to be one of the big economic engines in China besides Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou.
Okay, wonderful.
So
Yeah,
it's-
it is
we're
quite
ver-
sophisticated, Chengdu.
Right.
Yeah, so.
We're very fortunate to have them as a sister city relationship.
And speaking of sophistication, I love Shanghai. This is
Oh,
my
yes.
favorite city out of the ones
It's
I've
an
seen. I haven't seen
international
enough.
city,
Yeah, it is a
yes.
beautiful city, sometimes called the Paris of the Far East.
That's
In
correct.
the olden times. And we do have a relationship, but it's not with specifically Shanghai. It's Fengxian district.
Fengshan
Yeah,
is a
Fengshan.
suburban district way to the south at the end of the rail line, right on the Hangzhou Bay, the mouth of Hangzhou Bay. They asked to develop a relationship which was established about 2013 or so. So we Peter Carlisle and I went there to visit to help establish it, and it's ongoing. I think presently the Office of Economic Development, Ed Hawkins, is planning a trip there shortly to further the development of the relationships for Honolulu in that area.
Okay, so Fengshan is 2013, and we didn't mention Chengdu is 2011.
2011, right?
And I'm a wood rabbit in the astrological cycle, so 2011
yes.
was a rabbit year
Yes.
too. And
Very successful year for
Yeah.
Chengdu and Honolulu.
yes, that's rabbit is the luckiest sign,
Right.
so that was auspicious.
We've probably had next to Jungsan, the Chengdu relationship is the next most busiest. Right now, every summer we participate in the Chengdu International Youth Music Festival, where their 30 sister cities come from all around the world, from Russia, Belgium, Germany, Iceland, South America, Africa, and we all meet in Chengdu and play music for 4 straight days.
Wow.
And it's a tremendous exchange for the Chinese high school and college students to meet foreigners from all around the world. So we really love going there. This will be my 8th year attending that event. Last year I took Miss Hawaii and Miss
okay.
Hawaii USA.
Oh, brilliant.
And so they've just had a wonderful time there in Chengdu.
And finally, last but not least, is Zhangzhou.
Yes.
And this is the most recently
Yes.
made sister city. And when was this?
That was the following year, 2014.
2014.
The deal was I would go with Peter Carlisle to Fengshan if he would go with me to Zhangzhou. And another president of the Chinese Chamber took his Narcissus tour there. Leonard Kam, and to establish that relationship. I actually signed some of the documents, and Peter Carlisle did.
And this is because Zhangzhou is known as the Narcissus City.
That is
It
correct.
doesn't mean they're full of narcissus. It means it's known for the flower. You want to clarify that?
I knew you would go there. Yes, the narcissus flower in Chinese tradition represents prosperity, goodwill, and a beautiful incoming year. And so after the Korean War, when everyone was down here in Hawaii, World War II had ended, the Korean War was wrapping up. We wanted to do something in our Chinese community here. So the Chinese Chamber at the time created the Narcissus Festival using the daffodil, which is the narcissus flower, as its crowning glory for beauty. And they had a beauty contest called the Narcissus Contest. And that now is in its 67th or 68th year.
We have quite a few such festivals in Hawaii, like the Cherry Blossom Festival for the Japanese, but the Narcissus Festival is the oldest.
It is the oldest one. It's the most prominent one. We send our girls our young women to China on a tour, and they also participate in many instances for a number of years in the Miss Chinatown USA pageant. Now that's being run by the Chinatown Merchants, I believe, a different organization, because they were so busy. So some of them will run in that pageant also in San Francisco.
Okay, so these are the 6 sister city relationships we have between China and Honolulu, but we also have, like the Japanese, with the Japanese we have Kyushu as a sister state with Hawaii. We do have Guangdong as the sister state of Hawaii.
Yes, I can talk about that. I remember Linda Lingle going there twice. She invited the Chinese Chamber to go with her on her second trip. And so we were delighted to take her there, I think in 2008 or 2009, for their 30th anniversary of Guangdong's sister state projects around the world. It was a global event. And it was a wonderful time at their White Swan Hotel in Guangzhou. The mayor actually came up to me and said, hey, next year Guangzhou, the city, will have its 25th sister city relationship with Honolulu. And so he wanted to know if we would come, and Governor Lingo immediately said, Jeff, we're coming. And so she accompanied me the following year, and it happened to be my year as president of the chamber. And we also attended the Shanghai International Exposition. So it was just a wonderful year. We signed the Qingwandao documents also at that same time. And it was really a highlight time for Hawaii relationships with China. We continue to expand on that even today.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you so much for explaining each of these relationships for our audience.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday on Outside In at 2 p.m.
All right.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye-bye.